high above Alaska's frozen wilderness, where silence stretches across endless miles of ice and mountains stand like ancient guardians. Strange lights drift through the night. They move with impossible precision, glowing orbs that dart, vanish, and reappear as though they are aware of the eyes fixed upon them. Pilots, scientists, and everyday witnesses all describe the same impossible choreography. Objects that defy physics, hover without sound, and slip effortlessly from sky to sea as though the boundary between them does not exist. On certain nights, when the winds rest and the aurora spills soft ribbons of green and violet across the sky, these orbs return. They glide with deliberate grace, weaving patterns too purposeful to be random and too advanced to be dismissed. Some call them misidentified drones, or reflections of human innovation, but others move with a precision that challenges every law we trust. No sonic boom, no engine, no explanation. These are the mysteries now known as unidentified, anomalous, phenomena, shadows of intelligence that flicker at the edge of perception. They raise questions that stretch far beyond Alaska's icy horizon. What technology can halt midder without a whisper? What craft can descend into water without disturbing its surface? And who or what guides their silent maneuvers? This is a story of patience, curiosity, and wonder. A journey across the Arctic night where answers hide behind shimmering light. Tonight, we follow those glowing paths through the cold and into the unknown, listening to the quiet pulse of the orbs, as they carve their secrets across the sky, inviting us to witness, reflect, and feel the quiet thrill of something extraordinary brushing against our world. Chapter 1. Key Players and the Core Mystery. The night in Alaska stretched vast and endless, a canopy of stars mirrored by snow and ice below, as if the heavens themselves had spilled over onto the earth. In such a world, the ordinary and extraordinary often blurred, and those who watched closely began to notice how even the most subtle movement could carry meaning. It all started quietly in the halls of Northcombe. Radar screens flickered with anomalies that refused easy explanation, dots that appeared and vanished, objects that accelerated beyond the limits of known technology, and shapes that moved with a deliberateness that suggested intelligence. Pilots scrambled to intercept, their eyes scanning the horizon as the icy wind tugged at their planes. The F-22s and F-35s sliced through the Alaskan air like silver arrows, instruments alert to every fluctuation, every pulse of movement that could hint at threat or revelation. When the high-altitude object of February 2023 was detected, it seemed to emerge from nowhere, cylindrical, metallic, and devoid of any visible propulsion. It glided with precision that both fascinated and unsettled. The pilots who approached it could not discern its origins. Instruments fluctuated. Electronic interference rendered some sensors useless. Even the most seasoned observers felt an uncanny tension, a sense that the object was aware of them, studying them as closely as they studied it. Yet the military was only one piece of this intricate tapestry. Across the state, civilians looked up at the sky and witnessed patterns that mirrored those recorded on NORAD's radar. In Anchorage, a series of glowing orbs traced arcs over frozen rivers, their light refracting against the ice, casting shadows that folded and stretched in ways that seemed deliberate. In Yakutat, on the remote coast, residents recorded orange and gold orbs skimming the waves, their movements smooth yet impossible to categorize. Each sighting added nuance to the growing picture. Something was moving through Alaska's night skies with a grace and intelligence that defied conventional explanation. Whistleblowers and veterans added another dimension to the mystery. Anonymous testimonies filtered through congressional hearings and news reports revealed footage previously classified, showing orbs that endured missile strikes, vanished at will, and appeared to coordinate in formations, like silent, metallic schools of fish. Figures like David Grush spoke of frustration, of intelligence constrained by secrecy, and of glimpses into phenomena that were as delicate as they were unyielding. The pattern was clear. The human eye, whether military-trained or civilian, could capture fragments, but never the whole. The orbs existed partly in our perception, partly beyond it, dancing along the edge of what could be seen and measured. The orbs themselves were unlike any craft humanity had conceived. Ranging from 3 to 13 feet in diameter, they shimmered in metallic hues, reflecting light in ways that distorted perception. They could accelerate instantly, execute sharp right-angle turns, and travel seamlessly from air to water without causing turbulence, splashes, or sonic booms. The global record echoed these capabilities, The 2023 Mosul Orb, captured by a Reaper drone, displayed resilience to impacts. The 2024 Yemen incident saw a Hellfire missile ricochet off an orb, leaving the observers stunned. Each encounter, whether near Alaska or halfway across the world, suggested a consistency in behavior and a level of coordination that hinted at intelligence operating on a scale beyond human comprehension. Observers tried to make sense of the patterns. Pilots reported that some orbs would pause when they approached, almost as if inviting scrutiny, then resume their movements with precision that seemed to mock human instruments. Civilian reports described the lights bending around natural features: trees, mountains, rivers, as if the environment were part of a choreography. And while many sightings eventually resolved into conventional explanations, rocket vents, drones, atmospheric anomalies, the unexplained cases persisted, glowing in memory like constellations, too stubborn to ignore. The psychological weight of observation was subtle, yet pervasive. Those who tracked the orbs reported a heightened awareness of the world around them, a sensation that time had slowed and the landscape had acquired a new depth. Pilots described gripping the controls with a mix of tension and wonder, sensing a dialogue in the movements of the lights, a silent story being told in arcs and loops across the darkened sky. Civilians felt a magnetic pull, their imaginations ignited by patterns that seemed almost, but not quite, conscious. This was not fear, it was reverence, an acute awareness that the world was wider and more intricate than their previous understanding allowed. Military analysis attempted to rationalize the unknown. Accelerations, estimated at hundreds to over 1,000 G, challenged conventional physics. No engines, no exhaust, no aerodynamic surfaces could account for such movement. Theories ranged from advanced human technology to experimental propulsion systems, from warp bubbles to manipulation of space-time itself. Yet, as experts debated, one fact remained unassailable. Whatever the orbs were, they operated with an intelligence that respected the environment, the observers, and the intricate dance of night and ice. Alaska's landscape amplified the phenomena. The vast, frozen stretches, the jagged mountains, the mirrored lakes all served as canvases upon which the orbs performed. Snow-laden ridges reflected light in unexpected ways, creating illusions and revealing truths in equal measure. In these remote locations, few human eyes could witness the full spectacle, and fewer still could document it in a way that captured both beauty and precision. Those who did often described the experience as meditative, hypnotic, almost spiritual. The mystery deepened when patterns of coordination emerged. Orbs would move as a group, rising, turning, and descending in sync, maintaining spacing and timing that implied either a central intelligence or an intricate network of communication. Observers began noting subtle variations in color, trajectory, and behavior that hinted at adaptability, learning, and perhaps even intentional teaching began, imparting of understanding to those who watched. These were not random flashes of light. They were a language, expressed through motion and interaction with the Arctic environment. Scientific studies added weight to observation. Research suggested that energy requirements for such movements, if achieved by known physics, would generate heat, turbulence, or other detectable effects, but the orbs left none. The implications were profound. Either they used technology far beyond current human capability, or they were manifestations of a form of intelligence and presence that we had yet to conceptualize. In either case, the orbs demanded not only attention but patience, humility, and openness from those who sought to understand them. Civilian sightings often provided context that military instruments could not. A child watching from a frozen deck might describe a flicker that paused over a distant ridge, while a fisherman at sea recorded a formation of lights gliding across the waves. These perspectives, though informal, enriched the narrative, highlighting the interaction between observer and phenomenon. The orbs did not move in isolation. They moved in relation to awareness, presence, and attention. They were as much about what humans could perceive as about the objects themselves. The core mystery remained unchanged. The orbs existed, moved, and interacted. Yet their purpose, origin, and nature eluded definitive understanding. They were observers and performers, engineers and dancers, entirely present yet partly invisible. For those willing to watch, they offered lessons in patience, observation, and humility. For others, they remained fleeting glimpses, tantalizing fragments of a broader, unknowable reality. In this first chapter, the stage is set. Alaska's frozen expanse is both observer and canvas. The orbs are intelligent, deliberate, and awe-inspiring. Humans, in turn, are participants pilots, scientists, civilians drawn into a story of movement, reflection, and wonder. The mystery is not merely in the objects themselves, but in the dialogue between perception and presence, between curiosity and restraint. Here, in the still Arctic night, the world expands, and the unknown becomes a teacher, whispering lessons in motion, patience, and understanding. And as the orbs glide silently across the Alaskan night, the story of their patterns and purpose begins to unfold, revealing a world where intelligence and observation intertwine. Chapter 2. The timeline in the broader stage. The sky above Alaska was a tapestry of infinite darkness, woven with threads of shimmering auroras that curved and stretched like living brushstrokes across the firmament. Beneath it, frozen rivers reflected the northern lights, bending the colors into impossible geometries that danced across snow and ice. In this remote and ancient landscape, time itself seemed to dilate. The hours stretched and folded, and every moment became more than a point on a clock. It became an experience, a ripple in the fabric of perception. The story of the orbs, of the anomalies that had captured military, scientific, and civilian attention, was not confined to a single night or a single year. It unfolded slowly, deliberately, across decades, forming a continuum of observation, speculation, and quiet revelation. Early encounters were often dismissed, their details lost to skepticism or bureaucratic oversight. Consider the incident of Japan Airlines Flight 1628. In November 1986, high above the Alaskan tundra, a commercial plane encountered a colossal, shadowy silhouette, pulsing with irregular lights that reflected both in the cockpit and across radar instruments. The crew described sudden accelerations and maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. Turned sharper than any conventional aircraft could endure, movements calculated yet fluid, as if the entity were aware of every instrument, every human observer, and every nuance of the airspace it occupied. At the time, explanations ranged from atmospheric illusions to extraterrestrial speculation. But, in hindsight, it marked a crucial reference point. Whisper of intelligence, moving across the sky in deliberate, impossible grace. Decades passed, and patterns resurfaced in new forms. The Nimitz Tic-Tac incident of 2004, off the California coast, provided further evidence of the extraordinary. Radar captured rapid ascents and descents, accelerations that would have obliterated any human pilot, and a seamless command over motion that appeared to ignore inertia entirely. Pilots watched with a mix of wonder and disbelief, instruments capturing only fragments of what the human eye glimpsed. While distant from Alaska, this event set a precedent. The skies harbored anomalies capable of precise, intelligent action, often beyond detection or prediction. Alaska, with its strategic location, bordering Russia and in proximity to China, became a natural stage for these phenomena. February 2023 saw one of the most widely discussed incidents in recent history. A cylindrical object, Carsus Feast, entered the airspace near the Beaufort Sea. Nord radar detected its movements, and F-22s scrambled to intercept. The abject behavior confounded the pilots. It paused, shifted, and accelerated in ways that no known aircraft or drone could replicate. Attempts to track or disable it met with limited success. A sensor interference and unexpected evasive maneuvers rendered conventional technology nearly ineffective. Recovery was abandoned due to harsh Arctic conditions, leaving only tantalizing traces and questions in the cold, empty expanse. These contemporary events, however, did not exist in isolation. In July 2023, a congressional hearing brought the phenomenon into public discourse. Witnesses, including former military and intelligence personnel, recounted experiences that had long been shrouded in secrecy. Whistleblowers shared footage, some of it classified, depicting objects that endured missile tests, maneuvered with impossible precision, and traveled in coordinated patterns. David Grush and other experts highlighted the frustration within military circles over overclassification, and the hearings unveiled the tension between national security concerns and public curiosity. Transparency partial, though it was marked a turning point. Alongside military encounters, Civilian reports painted a complementary picture. Residents in Anchorage noted orange and gold orbs gliding over frozen rivers in early 2022, while coastal communities in Yakutat captured fleeting, glimmering anomalies on video. These observations often preceded military detection, illustrating a layered ecosystem of awareness. The orbs seemed to respond not only to environmental cues but to the attention of observers themselves. Their presence, fluid and deliberate, created a dialogue between intelligence and awareness, a quiet exchange of attention and reflection. As the timeline progressed, patterns became more discernible. ARO reports from 2023 cataloged 291 cases, identifying 171 as anomalous. By 2024, the database expanded to 757 cases, with 21 fully resisting conventional explanations. These reports revealed clusters in specific regions, including Alaska, and highlighted behaviors that ranged from instantaneous accelerations to transmedium travel, seamless transitions from air to water without turbulence, splash, or wake. Each data point contributed to a larger story, suggesting consistency, resilience, and possibly intention. The declassification of Yemen orb footage in September 2025 reinforced this continuity. Missile attempts that should have destroyed the objects instead revealed their remarkable resilience, echoing behaviors recorded in Alaska and elsewhere. Across continents and oceans, the phenomena exhibited similar patterns. Coordinated swarms, sudden accelerations, and adaptive movements that suggested observation, learning, and perhaps communication. The thread connecting these events was subtle but unmistakable. A form of intelligence, expressed through motion, consistent across time and space. Alaska's geography amplified these encounters. Its mountains, glaciers, and frozen waterways provided both concealment and stage, enhancing the mystery. Air bases like Elmendorf-Richardson functioned as monitoring nodes, and ADIZ protocols often brought human attention to regions where orbs appeared. In 2025, intercepts of Russian aircraft near Alaskan borders underscored the geopolitical dimension, reminding observers that these anomalies existed not only in the realm of physics and perception but in the landscape of strategic interest and human vigilance. Environmental conditions shaped perception as well. The clarity of Arctic nights, combined with minimal light pollution, allowed witnesses to discern subtle movements invisible elsewhere. Snow and ice reflected and refracted the auroras, creating shifting backgrounds against which the orbs moved with precision. Clouds, winds, and temperature inversions occasionally masked objects, adding an element of unpredictability that heightened the sense of wonder and challenge. Observation became an exercise in patience, attention, and sensitivity to the environment itself, reinforcing the notion that these phenomena were as much about human perception as about the objects themselves. Patterns of coordination also revealed themselves across multiple events. Orbs moved in formations that resembled flocks of birds, schools of fish, or insect swarms, rising and falling in synchrony, pausing and accelerating as if rehearsed. These behaviors suggested a system of communication, intentionality, and adaptability. Observers speculated whether the formations indicated learning, environmental awareness, or even guidance directed at those who watched. Each night offered new sequences, new configurations, and subtle variations that hinted at both intelligence and artistry. The timeline of events, from the 1986 Yawl incident through the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac and the 2023 Alaska shoot, demonstrates an evolution in observation, documentation, and understanding. Earlier encounters were fleeting, partially recorded or dismissed. Recent EBs, facilitated by advances in technology and public engagement, allowed for more precise documentation, analysis, and reflection. Yet the fundamental mystery remained. Objects continued to behave in ways that eluded full comprehension, challenging assumptions and inviting careful, deliberate attention. Even within military and scientific circles, debates persisted. Some theorized that the objects represented advanced foreign technology. Others proposed experimental propulsion, and still others considered non-human intelligence. In all cases, observers noted one constant. The orb's behavior was deliberate, adaptive, and harmonious with their surroundings. They were neither chaotic nor destructive, moving with purpose yet respecting the integrity of the environment and the presence of human witnesses. Alaska's skies had become a stage, the frozen landscape, a participant, and humanity an attentive audience. The timeline, stretching across decades, revealed a pattern of increasing visibility, consistency, and sophistication. The orb's movements, resilient and precise, drew attention to the delicate interplay of observation, intelligence, and patience. They reminded humans that understanding is not immediate, that presence and perception are as critical as data and analysis, and that the world holds mysteries that demand calm, reflective attention rather than hurried explanation. And as the auroras rippled above, as the wind whispered across glaciers and snow-laden valleys, the orbs continued their silent dance. Their trajectory was never random, their acceleration never careless. Each movement contributed to a story that unfolded not in words or labels, but in arcs, loops, and formations that communicated subtle intelligence, persistence, and perhaps even awareness of those who watched. Alaska, in its stark beauty and strategic significance, served as both witness and canvas. Observers, military, civilian, and scientific recorded, noting patterns, deviations, and consistencies. The timeline of events created a tapestry of encounters, a narrative thread connecting the past to the present and suggesting continuity into the future. Within this quiet Arctic stage, intelligence moved silently, gracefully, and intentionally, inviting humans to witness, learn, and wonder. And as the patterns of the past converge with the present, the story shifts from observation to significance, revealing the profound impact these silent visitors may hold for those who dare to watch. Chapter 3: Significance Impact. And the call to action. The northern horizon held a hush that seemed almost sacred. The frozen expanse of Alaska stretched endlessly beneath the sky, a quiet stage where light and shadow mingled, reflected, and danced in subtle rhythms. The auroras arced gracefully above, their gentle waves casting colors that shifted imperceptibly, painting the night with soft green, violet, and golden tones. In that stillness, it became evident that Alaska was more than a mere backdrop. It was a witness, a participant, and a canvas for the phenomena that had drawn attention across continents and decades. The orbs had moved silently across these skies for years, sometimes observed by trained military personnel, sometimes glimpsed by civilians in fleeting moments of wonder. Their significance was not merely in their presence, but in what they represented, a challenge to conventional understanding, a gentle nudge at the boundaries of human knowledge. For decades, reports had been dismissed as weather balloons, drones, or illusions. And yet, as the data and testimonies accumulated, the necessity of acknowledgement became undeniable. Something deliberate, intelligent, and resilient was moving through the Arctic skies, demanding attention, patience, and respect. The events in Alaska carried implications that stretched far beyond local fascination. National security agencies recognized the strategic importance of these observations. Alaska, positioned near the Bering Strait and in proximity to both Russia and China, had long served as a critical node in North American defense. Intercepts of foreign aircraft and the vigilant monitoring of the airspace were routine. Yet the arrival of these unexplained objects introduced new layers of complexity. They tested the detection capabilities of NORAD and North, prompting new protocols, alert levels, and contingency plans. The orb's unpredictability, intelligence, and technological resilience were unprecedented variables, altering the way human observers approached airspace, sovereignty, and vigilance. Yet, while the military contended with operational concerns, the public experienced a different form of awakening. The 2023 congressional hearings, followed by subsequent disclosures and whistleblower testimonies, illuminated not just the presence of these anomalies, but also the complex interplay of secrecy, transparency, and public perception. David Grush and other officials recounted experiences of internal frustration, of being constrained by classification rules, while knowing that the world deserved awareness. These revelations fostered a cultural shift. Suddenly, discussions that had been relegated to fringe circles about resilience to missiles, coordinated swarm patterns, and seemingly intelligent movement entered mainstream discourse. The world had begun to notice that Alaska's skies held mysteries that could no longer be ignored. The phenomena also forced introspection, prompting questions that spanned science, philosophy, and imagination. What did it mean if objects moved with intelligence beyond human comprehension? Could this represent advanced technology from another nation, or something far more enigmatic? Could the universe harbor entities whose understanding of motion, energy, and perception surpassed anything humanity had conceived? These questions did not yield easy answers. Instead, they encouraged reflection, patience, and curiosity, very qualities necessary to engage with the unknown without fear or dismissal. The societal impact was subtle but profound. People who once glanced at the sky without thought began to pause, to notice the delicate interplay of light and motion, to wonder at the vastness of space above and the mysteries it might conceal. Conversations shifted from skepticism to inquiry, from ridicule to cautious acknowledgement. Polls revealed that a majority of citizens now believed in the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, and an increasing number demanded transparency and accountability. This awakening, gentle yet persistent, indicated a cultural transformation in how humanity regarded its skies, its knowledge, and the limits of understanding. Science, too, found its curiosity sparked. Experts began exploring unconventional hypotheses, propulsion systems beyond chemical or electromagnetic limitations, manipulation of gravitational fields, even bending of spacetime to achieve instantaneous accelerations. Research funded by defense agencies and universities alike probed the boundaries of physics, engineering, and materials science, seeking explanations that could account for phenomena without violating fundamental laws. Yet, even as models and simulations advanced, the orbs continued their unpredictable dance above Alaska, reminding scientists that theory and observation often moved on different paths, converging only when patience and attentiveness allowed. The orbs' movements were not random. Their coordinated swarms, precise trajectories, and seamless transitions between air and water suggested not just technological mastery, but a form of intent. Observers described an almost conversational quality to their behavior. In the stillness of the Arctic nights, as humans watched from frozen ridges, coastal villages, or cockpit windows, it seemed as if the objects were aware of observation itself, responding subtly to attention, adapting to presence, and presenting sequences of motion that carried rhythm, beauty, and perhaps even communication. To witness them was to engage in a dialogue without words, a subtle exchange of awareness and understanding. In this context, Alaska emerged not just as a stage, but as a participant in a global phenomenon. The orb's presence was mirrored in other locations: the Yemen footage, the USS Omaha swarm, and historical encounters across continents and oceans. Each case contributed to a pattern of resilience, intelligence, and intentionality. What united them was not proximity, but behavioral consistency that suggested a shared framework, methodology, or perhaps consciousness. Observers began to notice details that once seemed insignificant. Slight pauses, coordinated turns, reflections of light, and responses to environmental cues. These nuances, when carefully recorded and analyzed, painted a picture of phenomena that were deliberate, complex, and profoundly enigmatic. The implications for national security were serious. Unidentified objects with unknown capabilities, operating in sensitive airspace, prompted the development of counter-U.S. strategies, advanced radar systems, and international dialogue. While the orbs themselves were not aggressive, their capabilities implied that other entities, human or otherwise, could exploit similar technologies. Military and scientific collaboration became more vital, blending observation, analysis, and interpretation to anticipate potential challenges. While continuing to study the phenomena without alarm or speculation-driven fear. At the same time, the cultural and philosophical dimensions of the encounters became increasingly visible. Writers, educators, and storytellers began to explore narratives of wonder, intelligence, and patience. Communities discussed the significance of observation, the ethics of disclosure, and the beauty inherent in phenomena that were neither malevolent nor fully comprehensible. Parents in small towns told their children of lights that danced across the horizon, of patterns that invited attention and reflection, emphasizing curiosity, attentiveness, and calm. Scholars wrote about perception itself, about the ways human awareness could interact with intelligence expressed through motion, light, and presence. The call to action, though subtle, was clear. Observers were encouraged to follow scientific inquiry, engage with policymakers, and maintain careful, rational records of experiences. Public engagement became a form of stewardship. Citizens, scientists, and pilots alike were participants in the ongoing dialogue between intelligence and perception, contacting representatives, advocating for transparency, and promoting evidence-based inquiry became acts of connection and responsibility. By participating thoughtfully, observers contributed to a larger understanding that stretched beyond borders, politics, or conventional limitations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long violet and golden shadows across icy plains, the orbs continued their silent ballet. Each maneuver, pause, and acceleration was a reminder that the world was larger than perception, that intelligence could express itself in forms both visible and subtle, and that human understanding was a journey, not a destination. Observers who remained attentive, patient, and curious found themselves transformed. Their vision sharpened, their awareness deepened, and a quiet sense of humility grew. The universe had layers, dimensions, and intelligences yet to be explored. Alaska's skies, once merely vast and empty, had become a place of dialogue, reflection, and wonder. Every sighting, every encounter, was a thread in a tapestry woven across decades and continents. The orb's presence, persistent and deliberate, invited humanity not to fear, but to listen, to watch, and to learn. In doing so, they offered lessons not just about motion or technology, but about observation itself, a patience to notice, the clarity to discern, and the openness to be changed by what is seen. Even in the quietest moments, when the auroras dimmed and the stars seemed to pause in their orbit, the sky held its secrets lightly, teasing, suggesting, and unfolding incrementally. Observers felt a gentle tension between expectation and patience, realizing that understanding was not something to seize, but something to grow into. Alaska, with its frozen rivers, rugged mountains, and reflective lakes, became a classroom of the infinite, and the orbs were both teachers and students, moving through space with intent, grace, and subtle guidance. In essence, these events marked a shift from curiosity dismissed to curiosity honored, from skepticism imposed to wonder acknowledged. They challenged perception, encouraged observation, and created a bridge between the known and the unknowable. The call to action was not dramatic. It was a whisper. Watch, record, reflect, engage, and remain open. In the silent dance of lights above the frozen expanse, the world learned to pause, to notice, and to honor the delicate balance between awareness and mystery. And so, Alaska's skies continued to shimmer, a place where intelligence, observation, and beauty converged, reminding humanity that the universe was vast, complex, and infinitely more intricate than our daily lives might suggest. As awareness deepens, the journey moves inward, exploring not only the skies above but the reflections they awaken within those who watch. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Arctic sky. Night had fallen across Alaska, and with it came a stillness so profound it seemed to press softly against the ears, a gentle weight that made every distant sound resonate with clarity. The wind skimmed across frozen plains, whispering through the sparse trees that dotted the landscape, carrying the faint scent of snow and ice. Above, the auroras flowed like liquid ribbons of color, shifting from emerald to violet to gold, painting the sky in luminous strokes that seemed to breathe with their own quiet rhythm. It was in this vast, hushed expanse that the orbs began to move silent, deliberate, and aware. The Arctic night amplified every subtle movement. An observer standing on a ridge could see their faint reflections mirrored in the ice below, shimmering in tandem with the shifting lights above. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the orbs would appear small, metallic spheres, glowing faintly, their surfaces reflecting the colors of the aurora in complex, swirling patterns. They hovered, they drifted, they accelerated with a grace that defied comprehension. Some moved alone, solitary travelers in the infinite night. Others moved in swarms, weaving intricate patterns as though choreographed to a rhythm that only they could perceive. Pilots recalled these nights vividly. One F-22's pilot, during an exercise over the Beaufort Sea, remembered the sudden appearance of a cluster of orbs above the northern horizon. At first, they were distant points of light, unremarkable and indistinct. But within moments, they shifted, accelerating beyond any conceivable propulsion, executing turns so sharp that instruments registered impossible G. The pilot's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a profound awe. The phenomenon was alive with purpose, yet it left no trace. No sonic boom, no wake, only the faint shimmer of motion against the Arctic blackness. Civilian accounts echoed these experiences, though with subtler details. Fishermen on the icy coast of Yakutat spoke of orange orbs that glided silently across the frozen waters, pausing to hover, then vanishing into the horizon as if considering whether to reveal themselves. Children in small towns would wake and point toward the sky, their eyes reflecting a light that was not quite the aurora, but something gentler, warmer, and almost sentient. Observers spoke of a dialogue without words, a quiet exchange of attention, a presence that seemed aware of being watched, yet never intrusive, always graceful. The timeline of encounters unfolded like a story whispered across generations. Early reports, long dismissed, now gained new significance. The 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628 incident, with its pulsing lights and shadowy silhouette, became a reference point, a hint that Alaska's skies had long been touched by the extraordinary. Later, the Nimitz Tic Tac incidents reinforced the idea that these objects were neither random nor accidental, but deliberate in movement, capable of feats that exceeded known human technology. These historical echoes informed every new observation, weaving a continuous thread from the past into the present. In 2023, that thread became strikingly tangible. The cylindrical object over the Beaufort Sea, its interception by F-2, and the subsequent abandonment of recovery efforts due to Arctic conditions left a haunting impression on those involved. NORAD officers, observing from radar consoles, felt the limitations of their technology as they tried to track its movements. Pilots experienced moments of vertiginous astonishment as the object responded to maneuvers with uncanny speed and precision. Scientists analyzing the data noted accelerations that could reach hundreds of G-forces, movements that implied advanced manipulation of gravity or spacetime. The orbs were not just objects, they were challenges, riddles suspended in the night, urging observers to reconsider the very nature of motion and intelligence. The phenomenon's persistence revealed something remarkable about attention and observation. Orbs appeared to respond to human presence. When Kometa's radar, or the gaze of a trained observer, focused upon them, they adapted, shifted, or altered patterns in ways that suggested awareness. Swarms moved in formations reminiscent of flocks of birds or schools of fish, rising and falling, diverging and converging with a precision that implied each display was unique, yet part of a recognizable linguagia. Quiet, elegant logic. Embedded in movement, Alaska's geography played a subtle but crucial role. Mountains acted as natural amphitheaters, reflecting sounds and light in ways that enhanced observation. Frozen rivers served as mirrors, doubling the visual complexity of the auroras and the orbs' movements. Coastal winds and temperature inversions occasionally obscured the objects, making each sighting unpredictable, creating suspense, and fostering patience among those who observed. The environment was a participant as much as a backdrop. It shaped perception, moderated visibility, and added nuance to each encounter. The orb's behavior suggested multiple layers of intelligence. Solo travelers exhibited exploratory movements, pausing, hovering, and scanning areas without apparent urgency. Swarms demonstrated coordination, synchronization, and a balance between individual freedom and collective rhythm. The objects were resilient, capable of withstanding environmental extremes, and seemingly impervious to conventional interference. Missile tests, radar sweeps, and electronic monitoring often failed to alter their behavior, reinforcing the notion that they operated on principles beyond current human comprehension. Beyond science and military observation, the encounters had philosophical and cultural implications. Communities began to recognize the importance of calm, patient observation. The phenomena encouraged a reflection on human perception. How much of the world is observed, and how much is inferred? What does it mean to witness something beyond explanation without fear, panic, or premature conclusion. Observers learned to attune their senses, to notice subtleties in light, motion, and spatial relationships. They cultivated awareness as a form of engagement, finding that understanding did not always require categorization or immediate explanation. The Arctic environment amplified the mystery. Snow-crusted landscapes reflected the smallest glimmers of light, making every movement more visible. Clouds could obscure and reveal objects unpredictably, creating a rhythm of anticipation and revelation. Stars, distant and cold, framed the auroras and the orbs, lending a sense of scale and perspective that emphasized the orbs' delicate presence against a vast backdrop. Even the silence of the frozen nights contributed a quiet so profound it felt as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the next subtle display of motion. Observers noted patterns that suggested not only intelligence but also intention. Swarms executed loops, pauses, and formations that seemed communicative. Individual orbs exhibited behaviors akin to curiosity, hovering, retreating, approaching in measured arcs, and responding to environmental cues. Each movement was precise, purposeful, and elegant. The objects were not aggressive. They were aware, deliberate, and subtle in their interaction with the world below. Witnesses often describe the sensation akin to recognition, as if the orbs acknowledged human attention without intrusion. Military, scientific, and civilian observations began to converge, creating a more nuanced understanding. Pilots and radar operators recorded movements. Civilians captured fleeting videos, and scientists analyzed data. The consistency across observations revealed resilience, intelligence, and patterns that transcended individual accounts. Even when isolated, each sighting contributed to a larger framework, a quiet chorus of evidence that suggested deliberate, intelligent activity. At the same time, the phenomena invited humility. Observers realized that human perception, measurement, and understanding were limited. The orb's movements highlighted the gaps between observation and comprehension, challenging assumptions about physics, technology, and intelligence. Each encounter required patience, attention, and openness, reinforcing the idea that understanding the extraordinary was not a matter of immediate mastery, but gradual revelation. In the Arctic night, the orbs were teachers, guides, and enigmas. They moved with intent, resilience, and elegance. They prompted reflection on human perception, intelligence, and curiosity. They invited participation not through force, alarm, or spectacle, but through the subtle, deliberate unfolding of presence and motion. Observers learned to watch, to notice, and to engage with humility and patience, understanding that the unknown need not be feared, but respected. And as the auroras rippled above, casting shifting shadows across ice and snow, the orbs continued their silent ballet, threading across the vast expanse with purpose, intelligence, and grace. The frozen landscape, the still air, and the attentive observers all became part of a shared moment, a delicate, ephemeral connection between intelligence, perception, and wonder. Alaska's night sky was no longer merely empty. It was a canvas of interaction, of reflection, and of quiet, persistent beauty. And as the Arctic night held its breath, the story deepened, moving from observation to reflection, from wonder to insight, guiding those who watched toward understanding and purpose. Chapter 5. Shadows and Signals. The first whispers of twilight stretched across Alaska's frozen horizon, painting the sky in a gradient of muted purples, soft indigos, and the faintest hints of amber. The mountains, sharp and jagged, seemed to catch the last vestiges of the sun's warmth, holding them like amber in their icy grip. Below, the rivers had frozen into glassy surfaces, reflecting the shifting sky above, a mirror that doubled the world, and yet hinted at hidden depths. In these reflective waters, observers often caught fleeting glimmers of movements elusive and impossible to dismiss. It was in this stillness that the orbs appeared, not all at once, not in a sudden flash, but gradually, as if the Arctic night itself had invited them to reveal themselves. They moved with a deliberate grace, gliding over mountains, dipping toward frozen lakes, and skimming across the snow in patterns that seemed both chaotic and intentional. One could almost imagine them communicating silently with the landscape, reading the contours of earth and ice, as effortlessly as a human reads a page of text. Their light was not harsh, but measured, a delicate shimmer that pulsed with soft rhythm, occasionally shifting in hue as if responding to unseen variables. Observers, military personnel, scientists, and civilians alike felt the same duality, all mixed with meticulous attention. Pilots, in particular, noted the phenomenon's precision. One F-22 pilot described a series of movements that seemed impossible, a group of orbs executing instantaneous accelerations, turning sharply at angles that would have shredded conventional aircraft, then hovering in perfect formation without disturbance. The pilot's voice had been hushed in recounting the experience, tinged with reverence rather than fear. It wasn't just movement, he said later. It was intelligence expressed through motion. Meanwhile, civilians offered equally compelling narratives, albeit less technical. A group of fishermen near the Gulf of Alaska spoke of orange orbs appearing above the frozen expanse at dawn, hovering silently, then vanishing just as suddenly. Children in remote villages would point to the sky in wonder, their eyes reflecting the soft glow of objects that moved as if aware of being observed. The orb's presence encouraged attentiveness, a patient observation that rewarded the calm and even the smallest glimmer. The tiniest shift in light, or trajectory, seemed to carry meaning, a quiet signal to those willing to notice. The timeline of these encounters unfolded like a tapestry, with threads woven through decades and continents. The 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628 incident, the Nimitz Tic Tac sightings, and the USS Omaha swarm all contributed layers of context, suggesting a long-standing phenomenon whose patterns were consistent across time and geography. Each new sighting in Alaska added nuance and depth, revealing resilience, coordination, and intelligence. Observers began to notice subtle correlations. Formations resembling natural patterns, accelerations beyond human capabilities, and movements synchronized with environmental conditions. Scientific inquiry intensified in response. Researchers examined radar data, thermal imaging, and eyewitness accounts, seeking explanations grounded in physics and material science. Yet, every analysis seemed to reveal new questions rather than definitive answers. Some proposed advanced propulsion technologies, such as gravity manipulation or warp fields, while others considered the possibility of entities operating beyond conventional physical laws. Even as theoretical models expanded, the phenomena themselves remained inscrutable, moving with a quiet mastery that resisted categorization. Alaska's environment enhanced the mystery. The Arctic conditions, extreme cold, reflective ice, and long periods of darkness create a natural lens, amplifying subtle changes in light and movement. Mountains, fjords, and frozen rivers acted as natural observatories, reflecting signals and refracting perception in ways that made observation both precise and delicate. Clouds and auroras added layers of uncertainty, their shifting forms creating moments of suspense and anticipation. To watch the orbs was to enter a dialogue with the environment itself, where observation, perception, and phenomena intertwined in silent harmony. Patterns in movement revealed hints of intention. Orbs often moved in loops, spirals, or sequences that suggested awareness of human attention. Some approached cautiously, paused, and withdrew, as if testing the observer's patience or sensitivity. Others synchronized with auroral rhythms, moving in tandem with pulses of light in a display that seemed almost musical in its coordination. These behaviors suggested more than intelligence. They implied a form of interaction, an unspoken communication across the gap between human and unknown. The strategic implications were subtle but profound. Military and scientific communities noted that the phenomena's resilience challenged existing detection systems, prompting new protocols and technological investments. Counter-UAS measures, advanced radar systems, and multi-sensor networks became increasingly necessary, not out of fear, but as precautionary measures against the unknown. The orbs, while known aggressive, highlighted vulnerabilities in perception, measurement, and readiness, encouraging preparation, attention, and adaptability. Culturally, the phenomena inspired reflection on observation itself. Communities learned patience, attentiveness, and the value of nuanced perception. Children were encouraged to watch the sky with curiosity rather than judgment. Adults recorded observations, noting subtle changes in movement, light, and timing. Writers, artists, and educators explored new narratives, blending wonder with rational inquiry, emphasizing the delicate interplay between observation, understanding, and imagination. In these quiet moments, the orbs became teachers, guiding human attention toward subtlety, patience, and reflection. The Arctic night, with its luminous auroras, mirrored waters, and crisp silence, created an environment where small details mattered. A slight shimmer on a distant ridge, a brief pause in movement, or a subtle reflection in the ice could reveal patterns invisible to hurried or distracted observers. The orbs rewarded those who practiced careful attention, creating a form of engagement that was at once educational, contemplative, and deeply personal. Even as science and observation progressed, the philosophical implications lingered. What did it mean to witness intelligence beyond current comprehension? How did one reconcile patterns of awareness, coordination, and responsiveness with the known laws of physics? Observers discovered that the orbs encourage humility. The phenomenon was not a challenge to conquer, but an invitation to engage, to expand perception, and to remain open to possibilities beyond conventional understanding. The interplay between observation and interpretation became a central theme. Pilots, radar operators, scientists, and civilians each contributed unique perspectives, creating a mosaic of understanding that was richer for its diverse. Patterns emerged not through isolated observation, but through shared attention, careful documentation, and reflective dialogue. In this collaborative exploration, the phenomena themselves seemed to guide participants, encouraging measured patience, curiosity, and attentiveness to detail. As the Arctic night deepened, the orbs continued their silent, deliberate movements. They rose and fell with grace, circled frozen lakes, and disappeared into the horizon with subtle elegance. Observers felt a sense of connection not through words, but through attention, reflection, and awareness. Each encounter reinforced the notion that the world held mysteries that were not to be feared, but honored, studied, and appreciated with patience and care. The night's final moments brought a sense of quiet closure. Observers would retreat to cabins, vessels, or aircraft, reflecting on the subtle lessons embedded in movement and light. Patterns that seemed trivial at first revealed depth upon review. Coordinated accelerations, synchronized pauses, and responsive movements suggested intelligence and intention. Yet, the phenomena retained their elusiveness, ensuring that each encounter was unique, unrepeatable, and profoundly engaging. And so, the Arctic sky held its whispers. The orbs, resilient and intelligent, continued their silent ballet across mountains, rivers, and frozen plains, teaching through presence rather than words. Observers learned to watch, to record, and to reflect, discovering that attention itself could be a bridge to understanding. The sky, the orbs, and the silent Arctic night became a shared space for reflection, curiosity, and gentle wonder, guiding those who observed toward patience, insight, and quiet joy. And as the lights traced their paths across the Arctic horizon, the journey deepened, moving from observation to the subtle dance of understanding. Chapter 6. Echoes across the frozen expanse. The night over Alaska stretched like an endless canvas, painted with deep indigos and the soft glow of the auroras, their colors spilling across the sky like slow-moving rivers of light. The snow beneath the mountains reflected a faint shimmer, as though the world itself had been dusted with starlight, creating an environment of quiet luminescence where every detail seemed amplified. In this serene expanse, the orbs moved with a presence that was subtle yet undeniably commanding, a gentle choreography against the backdrop of ice and sky. For those who observed, whether from the ridges, the frozen lakes, or the cabins nestled in the forests, the first encounters often began with small anomalies aglimmer, a faint reflection, a movement too deliberate to be a trick of light. And then, gradually, the phenomena revealed themselves more fully. Metallic spheres, their surfaces catching and refracting light in mesmerizing patterns, hovered and drifted with purpose. Swarms moved in synchrony, splitting and merging as though conducting a silent conversation. Even in the vast emptiness, there was an unmistakable sense of awareness, as if the orbs recognized the attention they received and responded with subtlety and care. Military observations added layers of precision to these encounters. Radar operators tracked sudden, impossible accelerations. A cylindrical object would appear miles away, then vanish in seconds, reappearing at a location no aircraft could reach without immense force. Pilots reported instruments flickering, compasses spinning erratically, and communications momentarily disrupted. Yet, these phenomena were not violent. There was no aggression, no sense of threat. Only an intelligence that operated beyond conventional understanding. One pilot recalled gripping the controls as he watched a small orb accelerate past, at speeds that defied calculation. His own heartbeat quickened not with fear, but with a sense of profound awe at witnessing something utterly beyond human comprehension. Civilian witnesses contributed their own perspectives, often colored with quiet wonder rather than technical analysis. Fishermen along the Bering Sea describe orbs rising from the horizon, glowing orange or amber against the midnight sky. Children in remote towns whispered stories of sky lanterns that moved on their imaginations, blending observation with the enchantment of the Arctic night. Researchers who interviewed these observers found patterns across accounts, subtle movements, pauses, and interactions with natural elements that suggested more than chance. Each sighting, whether from a radar screen or a child's wide-eyed gaze, added a brushstroke to a slowly emerging picture of intelligence, purpose, and extraordinary resilience. The historical echoes of earlier encounters resonated with these observations. The 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628 incident, the Nimitz Tic-Tac, and the USS Omaha swarm each left traces that informed the present. Analysts compared movement patterns, noting similarities in acceleration, formation, and responsiveness. Even decades apart, there was a consistency that suggested deliberate behavior rather than random anomaly. These connections offered observers a sense of continuity, as if the orbs had long moved through the skies, unobserved by many, yet always present, always watching, always aware of their environment. Scientific inquiry delved into the possible explanations, yet every analysis seemed to reveal new questions. Radar data indicated acceleration forces beyond human-engineered technology. Thermal readings suggested heat signatures that did not align with known propulsion, and electromagnetic interference challenged conventional understanding of physics. Theorists proposed advanced propulsion techniques, gravity, manipulation, space-time folding, or harnessing exotic energy fields. Despite extensive study, the phenomena retained their mystery, a testament to intelligence and capability that stretched beyond terrestrial understanding. Alaska's geography shaped perception and observation. Snow-covered mountains and ice-laden rivers acted as amplifiers, reflecting light and sound in ways that made every detail discernible. Cloud formations, auroral shifts, and temperature inversions casually masked or revealed the orbs, creating moments of tension and surprise. Observers found themselves attuned to these subtle cues, learning to anticipate patterns and interpret movements. The environment became not just a stage, but an active participant, influencing perception, guiding attention, and deepening the immersive experience of witnessing these events. The orb's movements carried implications far beyond scientific curiosity. Swarms demonstrated coordination suggestive of collective intelligence, moving in intricate formations that echoed natural systems like flocks of birds or schools of fish. Solo orbs exhibited exploratory behavior, pausing to hover over certain areas, retreating and returning with deliberate timing. Observers began to perceive a form of silent communication, where pauses, loops, and synchronized movements functioned as signals. It was a language without words, a dialogue enacted through motion, light, and presence. Military strategies evolved in response to these encounters. NORAD and NORTHCOM adjusted detection protocols, tracking methods, and response procedures, acknowledging that conventional tactics were insufficient. Simulations and radar analyses sought to predict movement patterns, while pilots trained to observe without interference, learning that engagement required patience and measured response rather than immediate action. The orbs, resilient and unpredictable, forced a reconsideration of preparedness, emphasizing awareness and adaptation over force. Culturally, the phenomena inspired reflection and creativity. Artists, writers, and educators explored the subtle interplay of observation, intelligence, and environment. Blend in fact with narrative in ways that captured the essence of these encounters. Communities encouraged patient observation, teaching children and adults alike to engage with the sky attentively, to notice the subtlest shifts in light and motion, and to interpret these signals with curiosity rather than fear. The orbs, in their silent ballet, became teachers of mindfulness, patience, and the quiet pursuit of understanding. The psychological effects were profound. Observers reported a shift in perspective, a sense of interconnectedness with the world around them. The orb's deliberate movements prompted reflection on perception, intelligence, and attention. Witnesses realized that understanding did not always require explanation. Sometimes it was enough to watch, to notice, and to acknowledge the presence of something greater than immediate comprehension. The Arctic night became a sanctuary for contemplation, a space where time slowed, and every glimmer of light, every subtle movement, carried significance. As the night deepened, the orb's patterns grew more complex, weaving through the landscape with precision and grace. Observers noted a rhythm, a cadence in their motion, as though the phenomena were attuned to natural cycles, auroras. Auroras shimmer, the wind's gentle sway, or the reflective shimmer of frozen rivers. Each observation revealed nuances previously unnoticed, micro-movements, subtle color shifts, or unexpected pauses that hinted at awareness and deliberation. The phenomena, while still mysterious, rewarded attentiveness, patience, and reflective observation. At the heart of these encounters was a profound lesson. The unknown need not inspire fear, but contemplation. The orbs operated beyond immediate human understanding, yet their presence encouraged engagement, curiosity, and humility. Each interaction emphasized that perception was as important as measurement, that attention could be a bridge to understanding, and that the Arctic night, with its stillness and expansiveness, was a perfect companion for reflection. By dawn, the orbs would retreat, slipping back into the invisible currents that carried them across the Arctic. Pilots returned to bases, scientists to labs, and civilians to homes, each carrying fragments of an encounter that defied simple explanation. Data, observations, and recollections slowly coalesced into insights that expanded comprehension incrementally, reinforcing the idea that understanding the extraordinary required patience, collaboration, and openness to the subtleties of the world. And as the first light of morning tinted the horizon in soft apricot hues, the sky seemed to exhale, leaving observers with a lingering sense of wonder. The orbs had moved through the Arctic night with intelligence, resilience, and grace, leaving behind not chaos, but a pattern of reflection, curiosity, and quiet insight. Alaska's frozen expanse, the aurora's delicate glow, and the silent movement of these enigmatic objects formed a tapestry of experience, a narrative. Attention honored perception and expanded the mind's capacity for wonder. And as daylight slowly approached, the whispers of the Arctic sky promised more revelations, guiding the journey from observation to understanding. Chapter 7. The dance of light. Alaska's nights had a rhythm all their own. The air, crisp and pure, carried a faint, almost imperceptible scent of snow and pine. Every breath seemed to echo in the vast silence, leaving a feeling of suspended time, as if the world itself had slowed to observe. Under this frozen sky, the orbs began their nocturnal ballet, a slow, deliberate dance that unfolded across mountains, rivers, and frozen plains, capturing the attention of those who watched with patience and reverence. The first hints of movement were subtle, a shimmer against the distant horizon, a flicker of metallic light that seemed almost accidental. Then, as the night deepened, patterns emerged. The orbs moved with a grace that suggested awareness, weaving in and out of sight, sometimes splitting into smaller clusters, only to reunite in synchronized arcs. Their light, soft yet unmistakable, cast gentle reflections on icy surfaces, creating an illusion of multiple layers of sky and ground, blending seamlessly. Observers often felt that if they blinked, they might miss something essential, fleeting secret whispered just for those paying attention. Military observers documented these movements meticulously. NORAD radar operators watched cylindrical and spherical objects accelerate to speeds that defied calculation, only to halt and hover, as though considering their next course. Pilots described instruments responding erratically, compass needles spinning, altimeters fluctuating, and communications briefly disrupted. Yet, there was no aggression, no threat. The intelligence behind the motion seemed deliberate, but contemplative. A careful probing rather than an assault. One F-35 pilot described the feeling as if he were part of a slow conversation, where each maneuver the orbs made was a word, and every pause a punctuation mark, asking him to respond with quiet attention rather than force. Civilians, too, became participants in this quiet dialogue. Fishermen watching the Gulf of Alaska reported seeing amber orbs glide across frozen waterways, pausing to hover as if observing human activity, then retreating with gentle arcs that mirrored the curvature of the land. Children in remote villages would gather outside in the quiet evenings, pointing skyward with eyes wide and unblinking, whispering stories of sky spirits that moved with intention and care. Researchers studying these accounts found a recurring theme. The orb's behavior often appeared responsive, a delicate dance that acknowledged observation while maintaining mystery. Historical parallels added depth to contemporary sightings. The 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628 incident over Alaska, the Nimitz Tic Tac encounters, and the USS Omaha swarm all contributed threads to a growing tapestry of understanding. Analysts noted striking similarities in movement, acceleration, and formation, suggesting that the phenomena had been present for decades, operating with an intelligence that remained consistent even across continents and generations. Each new observation in Alaska reinforced these patterns, revealing layers of complexity and adaptability that challenged conventional notions of physics, aerodynamics, and perception. Scientific inquiry sought to decode the dance. Radar data, thermal imaging, and eyewitness accounts provided fragments of insight, yet each discovery raised further questions. How could these objects achieve instantaneous acceleration without generating shockwaves or sonic booms? How did they maintain precise formations while maneuvering at extreme velocities? Theorists proposed mechanisms that stretched imagination, manipulating gravity fields, warping spacetime locally, or utilizing energy sources unknown to humanity. Yet, despite sophisticated analysis, the phenomena retained their allure, moving with deliberate mystery that both frustrated and inspired. Alaska's geography amplified the impact of observation. Snow-covered peaks reflected light in ways that enhanced perception, while frozen rivers and lakes created natural mirrors, allowing observers to catch glimpses of movement that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Clouds and auroras added layers of nuance, sometimes concealing, sometimes revealing, crafting a delicate interplay between environment and observer. Every sighting was a lesson in attentiveness, a gentle reminder that perception required patience, presence, and careful observation. The orb's interactions often conveyed subtle messages. Solo objects would approach cautiously, hovering over specific areas, pausing, then retreating and returning at intervals that suggested deliberate timing. Swarms moved as cohesive units, splitting and recombining with precision reminiscent of insect or bird formations. Yet their motion retained an elegance and intelligence that felt otherworldly. Observers began to perceive patterns, recognizing sequences that hinted at communication or deliberate coordination. The phenomena seemed to value subtlety, engaging only those willing to observe attentively, rewarding curiosity with glimpses into their complex behavior. Cultural implications unfolded alongside these sightings. Artists, writers, and educators explored the orb's movement as inspiration, interpreting them as a form of silent narrative expressed through motion, light, and presence. Communities encouraged observation over immediate explanation, teaching that understanding could emerge through reflection and attention rather than force or intrusion. Children learned to watch with quiet curiosity. Adults learned to listen to the environment, and both discovered the value of noticing the subtle interplay between observer and observed. Psychologically, these encounters shifted perspective. Witnesses reported a deep sense of connection not through words, but through shared presence with the phenomena. The orb's deliberate movements encouraged reflection, patience, and mindfulness, offering lessons about attention, perception, and the limits of human understanding. Observers recognized that comprehension did not always require full explanation. Sometimes it was enough to witness, to notice, and to honor the presence of intelligence operating beyond immediate recognition. As the night progressed, the orb's movements became increasingly intricate. The Arctic night itself seemed to participate in this choreography. Wind patterns influenced movement subtly. Ice reflections added layers of complexity, and auroras provided a natural backdrop that highlighted the orb's elegance. In these moments, Watching the orbs became not just observation, but participational conscious engagement with a living, intelligent, and beautiful system that existed beyond immediate comprehension. By the early hours, the orbs began to retreat, fading into the invisible currents that carried them across the Arctic. Observers returned to cabins, vessels, or bases, carrying fragments of insight, wonder, and reflection. Data, notes, and recollections were slowly compiled, forming the foundation for understanding that unfolded incrementally. Each encounter reinforced the notion that intelligence and mystery could coexist. That observation itself could be an act of connection, and that the world held subtle lessons for those who paused to see. And as the first light of dawn tinged the horizon with soft peach and lavender hues, the Arctic landscape exhaled. The mountains, rivers, and frozen plains seemed to retain the memory of the night's dance, shimmering faintly in the morning light. Observers felt a lingering resonance, a quiet echo of presence and purpose that the orbs left behind. Alaska's expanse, with its stillness, beauty, and subtle complexity, had become a stage for intelligence. Beyond immediate understanding, a silent teacher, offering lessons in attention, perception, and humility. In this quiet awakening, it became clear that the orb's dance was more than spectacle. It was a guide, a patient and deliberate invitation to observe, reflect, and expand one's awareness. Through light, movement, and presence, they encouraged an engagement with the extraordinary that was calm, immersive, and profoundly human in its invitation to wonder. As the first rays of light touched the frozen landscape, the Arctic whispered promises of deeper truths waiting to unfold. Chapter 8. Whispers Beyond the Horizon. The horizon stretched endlessly across the Alaskan tundra, painted in shades of muted lavender and frost-tipped silver. A delicate stillness hung in the air, so complete that even the soft sigh of the wind felt amplified, resonating across frozen rivers and snow-laden plains. In this quiet expanse, the world seemed to pause, inviting observers to lean in closer, to notice the subtle details that often go unseen: the gentle ripple of ice under the weight of the wind, the fleeting reflection of clouds across frozen lakes, and most importantly, the ethereal movement of objects that had captivated the sky for decades. It began as a whisper, a shimmer near the horizon that seemed almost accidental. Then, with measured grace, the metallic spheres glimmering with faint, ever-shifting hues emerged fully into view. They glided silently, their motion fluid, almost conversational, as if aware of the humans who had learned to watch without haste. The orbs moved in unison, forming patterns that were intricate yet organic, responding to terrain, wind, and perhaps the subtle energies of the Arctic night itself. Their presence was both commanding and unobtrusive, a paradox that filled observers with a sense of reverent anticipation. Military personnel, scientists, and civilian observers each brought their own lens to these encounters. Radar screens displayed sudden accelerations that defied known physics: cylindrical objects leaping across miles in seconds, spheres hovering without discernible propulsion. Pilots described the experience as almost meditative, the controls steady beneath their hands as they followed movements that seemed more choreographed than random. Every instrument anomaly, every magnetic fluctuation, felt like a note in a symphony that demanded attention, patience, and respect. One veteran pilot recounted gripping his controls, eyes fixed on a shimmering orb, sensing that the craft was aware of being observed, moving deliberately in response to subtle cues in the environment. Civilian accounts carried a softer, more poetic layer to the narrative. Fishermen recalled amber lights floating above the Gulf, pausing over frozen waters before retreating with elegance. Children in small towns whispered stories of sky dancers, their voices tinged with wonder as they described arcs and loops traced against the twilight sky. Researchers, piecing together these narratives, found recurring patterns: pauses, shifts, synchronized movement, and subtle changes in hue. Each sighting, whether grounded in scientific observation or childlike storytelling, contributed to a growing understanding of behavior, intention, and intelligence beyond immediate comprehension. The phenomena did not act haphazardly. Patterns of movement suggested awareness, as if the orbs read the landscape and adapted in response. Solo orbs would hover above a ridge, then retreat, only to return in a precise sequence. Swarms executed fluid formations, splitting and recombining with organic coordination reminiscent of natural flocks or schools, yet guided by an intelligence that was distinctly deliberate. Observers began to perceive a kind of silent communication, a nuanced interaction between the observer and the phenomena, where attention, patience, and observation were rewarded with fleeting insights into their behavior. Historical echoes resonated with these contemporary events. The Japan Airlines Flight 1628 incident, the Nimitz Tic Tac sightings, and the USS Omaha swarm offered reference points, revealing consistency in behavior across decades and continents. Analysts noted similarities in acceleration, formation, and responsiveness, suggesting a continuity of intelligence that had persisted quietly over time. Each new observation in Alaska added depth to this mosaic, painting a portrait of entities whose presence was steady, subtle, and profoundly consistent, even when veiled in mystery. Scientific investigation persisted, driven by curiosity in the pursuit of understanding. Data collected from radar, thermal imaging, and eyewitness accounts revealed anomalies that challenged conventional knowledge. Accelerations reached forces that would tear apart human-engineered machines. Yet the orbs maintained integrity. Thermal signatures defied known energy patterns. Electromagnetic interference disrupted instruments without any discernible pattern of malice. Theorists proposed possibilities that stretched imagination. Yet, despite rigorous study, the orb's behavior retained an elegance that defied complete explanation. Alaska's unique environment amplified the subtlety of observation. Snow-covered peaks reflected faint glimmers of light. Frozen rivers acted as natural mirrors, and drifting clouds shaped perception, sometimes hiding, sometimes revealing the objects. Observers learned to watch with patience, adjusting their focus to subtle shifts in movement, hue, and trajectory. Every reflection, every micro-shift became meaningful, an invitation to notice patterns that could only emerge through careful attention. The environment itself seemed to conspire with the phenomena, creating moments of revelation for those attuned to the quiet nuances of the Arctic night. The orb's interactions often suggested intelligence with purpose. Movements were deliberate, balanced between revealing themselves and maintaining mystery. Solar orbs explored the landscape cautiously, responding to human presence with subtle shifts, while swarms demonstrated intricate coordination, splitting and merging seamlessly, displaying a depth of planning and awareness. Observers began to sense a dialogue silent, fluid, and nuanced where every motion was a word, every pause a sentence, and the entire ballet. A conversation that asked humans to engage with curiosity, reflection, and humility. Cultural ripples extended beyond mere observation. Artists, writers, and educators found inspiration in the orb's graceful patterns, interpreting them as stories expressed through light, motion, and space. Communities encouraged mindful observation, teaching children and adults to appreciate the subtleties of the world, fostering patience, and cultivating reflective attention. The orbs became metaphors for learning, for quiet understanding, and for the beauty inherent in subtlety, reminding those who watch that comprehension sometimes arises from listening, observing, and simply being present. Psychologically, the encounters shifted perspectives. Witnesses reported heightened awareness, a sense of interconnectedness with the world, and a newfound appreciation for subtlety. The orb's silent intelligence encouraged reflection on the nature of perception, the limits of knowledge, and the depth of what remains unseen. Observers discovered that understanding did not always require explanation. Sometimes, it was enough to notice, to reflect, and to honor presence. The Arctic night, vast and unbroken, provided the perfect stage for this gentle awakening, allowing minds to expand in quiet contemplation. As the night wore on, the orb's patterns became more intricate, weaving between mountains, gliding over frozen lakes, and tracing arcs that seemed almost musical in rhythm. Observers recorded every nuanced, the tiniest flicker of light, a pause mid-flight, a subtle shift in formation recognizing that each action contributed to a silent narrative. The phenomena rewarded patience, curiosity, and meticulous attention, revealing layers of complexity that were both mesmerizing and humbling. The Arctic landscape itself participated in this delicate dance. Wind, snow, ice, and light interacted with the orbs, shaping perception and creating an immersive environment where every detail mattered. Observers began to realize that they were not merely watching. They were engaging, participating in a shared space where intelligence, environment, and attention intertwined. In this quiet communion, the orbs became teachers, imparting lessons in observation, awareness, and the value of subtlety. By the approaching dawn, the orbs slowly retreated, vanishing into the unseen currents that carried them across the Arctic expanse. Observers returned to cabins, vessels, and bases, carrying impressions, reflections, and fragments of understanding. The events of the night offered insight without finality, encouraging a patient engagement with mystery that respected both the known and the unknowable. Every encounter became a meditation, a gentle reminder that the world holds layers of intelligence, awareness, and subtlety beyond immediate perception. And as the first light of morning touched the horizon with pale gold and soft rose hues, Alaska seemed to exhale. Mountains, frozen rivers, and snowfields shimmered faintly, as though the night's dance had left an indelible mark. Observers sensed a lingering presence, a quiet echo of intelligence and awareness that had passed through the Arctic sky, leaving behind patterns, lessons, and an invitation to continue watching with curiosity and patience. And as sunlight stretched across the frozen plains, the Arctic whispered promises of revelations yet unseen, guiding observers deeper into the mysteries that lingered just beyond perception. Chapter 9. Secrets Beneath the Northern Lights. The Arctic night held a quiet anticipation, as if the landscape itself knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The auroras stretched across the sky in slow, undulating waves, their colors drifting like liquid silk greens, melting into purples, blues blending into pinks, casting the snowy expanse in a dreamlike glow. Beneath this celestial curtain, the orbs moved with an almost imperceptible rhythm, their surfaces reflecting the northern lights in a kaleidoscope of subtle brilliance. Shimmer. Each gentle movement drew observers deeper into a state of attentive wonder. Those who had spent nights under the Arctic sky noticed how perception transformed in this environment. Time seemed to stretch and fold. Minutes could feel like hours, and each detail, from the sparkle of frost on a tree branch to the faint reflection of light on frozen rivers, seemed magnified in clarity. And then, as if guided by invisible currents, the metallic spheres emerged. Their surfaces glinted softly, showing hints of copper, silver, and faint gold as they drifted silently above the terrain. The movements were deliberate yet fluid, a silent choreography that suggested awareness, intelligence, and a careful observation of the world below. Pilots and military personnel continued to document these encounters with meticulous care. F-22 and F-35 pilots reported phenomena that challenged every principle of conventional flight, objects accelerating to unimaginable speeds, making sharp right-angle turns without deceleration, or transitioning seamlessly from air to water and back. Instruments behaved unpredictably. Altimeters fluctuated, compasses spun, and radar signals sometimes vanished entirely, leaving operators to rely on intuition as much as technology. These anomalies, rather than inspiring fear, instilled a profound sense of awe, a recognition that human understanding was only beginning to brush against the edges of a much vaster intelligence. Civilians added a layer of emotional richness to the observations. Fishermen on the Beaufort Sea recalled orange and amber lights moving in delicate arcs above frozen inlets, sometimes lingering as if observing the human activity below, then retreating into the darkness. Children, drawn by the ethereal glow of the auroras, whispered stories of sky spirits performing silent dances above their homes. Scientists collated these accounts, identifying patterns that spanned years and geography. Each detailed the pause of a single orb, the synchronized movement of a swarm, the subtle flicker of reflected lighted nuance, to an evolving understanding of behavior, intelligence, and purpose. Historical incidents resonated within these contemporary observations. The 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628 encounter, the Nimitz Tic-Tac events, and the USS Omaha swarm each contributed to a growing sense of continuity. Analysts noted that certain movement patterns, acceleration capacities, and formations had persisted across decades, suggesting a deliberate intelligence that maintained consistency regardless of time or place. For observers in Alaska, these echoes imbued each encounter with depth, reinforcing the notion that the phenomena were neither random nor isolated, but part of a larger, more intricate pattern. Scientific inquiry remained both rigorous and humble. Radar data, thermal imaging, and eyewitness reports provided fragments of understanding. Yet each piece often led to more questions than answers. Accelerations reached thousands of Gs, yet the objects remained intact, defying known material limitations. Thermal signatures behaved anomalously, suggesting unknown energy mechanisms. Electromagnetic interference disrupted electronics unpredictably, further illustrating that conventional technology could neither control nor fully comprehend the orb's movements. Theories emerged: manipulation of gravity, warping of local spacetime, or harnessing exotic energy sources, but each remained speculative, tantalizing, and humbling in equal measure. Alaska's unique geography added layers of perceptual richness. Snow-covered peaks reflected and diffused the faint light of the orbs, while frozen rivers created mirrors that doubled the apparent number of objects. Low-hanging clouds occasionally obscured or revealed clusters of orbs, creating moments of surprise and heightened attention. Observers learned to read these cues, understanding that patience, awareness, and careful observation were essential to fully appreciating the phenomena. Every subtle shift in movement, light, or reflection was meaningful, a clue and an ongoing puzzle that rewarded those willing to look closely. The orbs themselves displayed a level of complexity that suggested intelligence far beyond immediate comprehension. Solo orbs would pause above ridges, drift near observers, or change their speed in nuanced ways. Swarms moved in mesmerizing formations, splitting and rejoining with near-perfect timing, displaying coordination reminiscent of insect swarms or bird flocks, yet with a deliberateness that hinted at thoughtful design rather than instinctual behavior. Observers began to perceive these motions as a kind of language, a silent communication conducted through light, movement, and space. Every pause, every loop, every subtle flicker felt purposeful, as though the orbs were inviting humans to witness, reflect, and understand on their own terms. The psychological effect of these encounters was profound. Witnesses reported heightened awareness, a feeling of interconnectedness with the environment, and a subtle shift in perspective. The orb's deliberate movements encouraged reflection, patience, and a recognition that knowledge could emerge through observation rather than immediate explanation. In the quiet of the Arctic night, observers felt that they were not just watching but participating in a shared space where intelligence, environment, and attention intersected. The orbs taught that comprehension was often less about answers and more about perception, a lesson in humility and attentive observation. Cultural and artistic responses flourished in parallel. Writers, visual artists, and educators drew inspiration from the orbs' movements, interpreting them as stories told through motion, light, and interaction with the landscape. Communities fostered engagement with observation, teaching children and adults to appreciate subtlety, patience, and the beauty of noticing. The orbs became more than phenomena; they became guides, models of quiet intelligence, and gentle instructors in the art of mindful attention. As the night deepened, the orbs' choreography became increasingly intricate. They traced spirals over frozen lakes, hovered above distant ridges, and executed precise arcs and loops that seemed musical in rhythm. Observers recorded every nuance, the faintest flicker of reflected light, a pause in flight, the subtle angle of ascent or descent. Each gesture contributed to a silent narrative, revealing layers of sophistication and intelligence that rewarded attentiveness, curiosity, and patience. The Arctic night itself, with its stillness and clarity, became an accomplice in this display, amplifying the wonder of observation. By the approaching dawn, the orbs gradually disappeared, slipping back into unseen currents that carried them across the Arctic sky. Observers returned to cabins, stations, and ships, carrying memories, notes, and impressions that would take months or years to fully understand. The night had offered a profound meditation on awareness, intelligence, and the beauty of subtlety. Each encounter left traces mental, emotional, and observational that lingered, suggesting that the mysteries of the Arctic sky were never fully lost, but always present, awaiting patient attention. And as the first light of morning tinted the horizon in soft apricot and lavender hues, The frozen landscape seemed to breathe. Snow-covered peaks, frozen rivers, and quiet forests shimmered faintly, as if retaining the memory of the orb's dance. Observers sensed the enduring presence of intelligence, a subtle echo that lingered in the mind and spirit, leaving them with questions, reflections, and a gentle invitation to continue exploring, noticing, and participating in the quiet majesty of the world around them. And as daylight softened the Arctic horizon, the whispers of the sky promised revelations that had yet to fully emerge, drawing observers closer to the truths waiting beyond the visible. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Unknown. The early Alaskan evening unfolded with a delicate, almost sacred quiet, where the fading sunlight merged with the first glimmers of twilight. The sky stretched endlessly, painted in soft gradients of rose, lavender, and deepening indigo, as if the horizon itself were breathing. Snow-dusted peaks shimmered faintly, reflecting the dying warmth of the sun, while the frozen rivers and lakes mirrored the vast, tranquil expanse above. In this liminal space between day and night, the subtle hum of the Arctic world seemed to amplify, calling attention to phenomena that often went unnoticed. Yet tonight, they were impossible to ignore. A faint glimmer appeared, first at the edge of perception, as if the air itself had begun to shift. Observers who had learned the art of patience recognized the signal immediately. The metallic spheres, known across decades of sightings, they moved with deliberate grace, weaving between clouds and peaks, their light softly refracted by ice and frost. The orb's movements carried a rhythm, a language of motion that seemed designed for attentive eyes and reflective minds. Each slight rotation, pause, or acceleration felt purposeful, suggesting not random trajectory, but observation and interaction. From remote monitoring stations to civilian outposts, Alaska's inhabitants watched in quiet awe. Pilots scribed instruments, faltering altimeters swinging, compass needles oscillating, but the objects themselves remained intact and unthreatening. These anomalies, while defying conventional understanding, created a sense of intimate connection rather than fear. Observers felt that the orbs were aware of being witnessed, their motions carefully measured, responding to human attention as if acknowledging it. One scientist, recording thermal imaging, noted a pause where the orbs lingered above a ridge, hovering in near silence, allowing the observer to capture an almost meditative image, like a whispered gift from the unknown. Civilian experiences added depth and nuance to the narrative. Fishermen observed ember lights tracing arcs above frozen inlets. Children whispered stories of sky dancers, and communities began documenting repeated patterns with quiet fascination. These accounts, when collated with radar data, revealed patterns that hinted at intelligence, intention, and perhaps even subtle communication. The sphere's movements were neither chaotic nor purely mechanical. They demonstrated decision-making awareness and a consistency that suggested a coherent presence across both time and space. Historical parallels added layers of understanding. The Japan Airlines Flight 1628 encounter, the Nimitz Tic-Tac sightings, and the USS Omaha swarm all contributed echoes of past interactions, offering continuity in behavior. Analysts recognized repeating patterns, acceleration beyond known technology, precise right-angle maneuvers, and transmedium travel across air and water without disruption. The orb's behavior had been remarkably consistent over decades, suggesting that the intelligence guiding them operated under a set of principles invisible to human perception, yet profoundly coherent in its execution. Scientific inquiry remained both rigorous and contemplative. Every acceleration, maneuver, and electromagnetic anomaly was meticulously logged. Theorists speculated about possible propulsion mechanisms, localized space-time manipulation, energy sourced from yet undiscovered physical phenomena, or methods that circumvented inertia as humans understand it. Yet, despite advanced technology and modeling, the full scope of capability remained elusive. Observers were forced to accept that the orbs existed on the edge of comprehension, testing the boundaries of physics while imparting subtle lessons about observation, attention, and patience. Alaska's landscape heightened the sensory experience. Snowfields and frozen rivers created natural mirrors, amplifying the orb's light in ways that revealed intricate movement patterns otherwise hidden. Low-hanging clouds shifted unpredictably, occasionally concealing, then revealing, as though the environment itself was part of the choreography. Observers learned to read these subtle cues, realizing that patience and attentiveness were rewarded with glimpses into a complex intelligence. Every reflection, every pause, every micro-adjustment in motion became a vital clue in understanding a narrative unfolding silently across the Arctic sky. The orb's behavior hinted at a layered purpose. Solo orbs explored terrain carefully, observing before moving on, while swarms demonstrated extraordinary coordination. They split and merged, responding to topography and environmental cues, suggesting an awareness that transcended immediate visual perception. Observers began to recognize subtle patterns of intent, the way a single orb might pause over a ridge before rejoining a group, or how clusters navigated complex terrain without error. This silent dialogue was not random. It was deliberate, offering lessons in observation, reflection, and a profound understanding of environment and presence. Psychologically, encounters reshaped human perception. Witnesses reported a sense of profound attentiveness, an awareness of subtlety and motion, and a quiet recognition of intelligence. Beyond human understanding, the orb's deliberate interactions prompted introspection. What could it mean to truly observe without seeking immediate answers? How could presence and patience reveal truths that eluded hasty inquiry? Observers found themselves reflecting on their place in the larger fabric of the natural and the unknown, cultivating a humility and wonder that persisted long after the orbs had moved on. Cultural interpretations flourished. Artists and writers translated the orb's movements into visual art, stories, and music, seeing them as expressions of silent intelligence. Educators used the phenomenon to teach attentive observation and reflection, illustrating that engagement with mystery was an essential aspect of learning. Communities encouraged noticing and documenting subtleties, fostering a culture of mindfulness where observation itself became a valued skill. The orbs, once purely mysterious, became teachers, guiding attention and awareness through the gentle grace of motion and light. As the night deepened, the orchestration of movement became more intricate. Swarms traced spirals over frozen lakes, hovered above ridges, and executed arcs that seemed choreographed in invisible rhythm. Every shift, flicker, and pause carried meaning. Observers felt that the objects were shaping a narrative of their own design, inviting careful, reflective participation. The Arctic environment complemented this display, with wind, snow, and auroral light interacting with the orbs to create a multi-sensory experience, heightening the perception of intelligence and subtle communication. By the early hours, the orbs began to retreat, fading into currents unseen, leaving behind traces not only in instruments and logs, but in human consciousness. Those who had observed carried a sense of elevated awareness, a deeper connection to both the environment and the unknown. The Arctic seemed to hold a memory of the encounter, a faint shimmer in snowfields, a subtle echo in the movement of ice, a quiet resonance in the stillness of the morning. Observers knew that while the phenomena had moved on, their lessons lingered. Patience, attentiveness, and humility in the face of intelligence that surpassed immediate comprehension. As the first pale light of dawn stretched across the frozen horizon, the landscape exhaled. Snow-covered mountains, icy rivers, and quiet forests reflected a soft, gentle brilliance, carrying the memory of the night's subtle choreography. Observers felt the enduring presence of something extraordinary, a quiet intelligence that had revealed itself not through force but through deliberate grace, inviting reflection, wonder, and a willingness to see beyond what is immediately visible. And as sunlight kissed the Arctic peaks, a sense of lingering mystery remained, guiding observers toward truths that waited patiently beyond perception. Chapter 11. Currents of the Invisible. The night arrived slowly over Alaska, a velvet cloak that softened the edges of the world and deepened the sense of quiet anticipation. The sky above was a tapestry of twilight blues, interspersed with faint traces of auroral green that shimmered like gentle whispers. Each ridge, each frozen river, each snow-laden tree seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the arrival of phenomena that had long captured the human imagination. In a suspended moment, the air itself felt alive, resonating with subtle energy and the promise of secrets yet to reveal themselves. It began with a ripple of disturbance so gentle it might have gone unnoticed by an untrained eye. But those who had spent nights watching the Arctic sky recognized the signature immediately. The metallic orbs were moving again, gliding across the horizon in silent, deliberate arcs. Their surfaces glinted with hints of copper and silver, reflecting the auroras in slow, undulating patterns. The light they cast was soft yet penetrating, illuminating the ice and snow below, casting shadows that danced with their motion. Observers felt the air vibrate, not audibly, but through the subtle resonance of movement and light, as if the Arctic itself were acknowledging their presence. From military outposts to remote villages, eyes were turned skyward. Pilots reported familiar anomalies, accelerations that defied physics, sudden halts in midair, and transitions from air to water without splash or disturbance. Instruments faltered inexplicably. Compasses spun and radar signals flickered in ways that could not be rationalized by known technology. Yet there was no threat, only an elegant display of intelligence and motion, demanding attention and reflection. One veteran pilot described gripping the controls lightly, feeling an odd mixture of tension and serenity, realizing that the orbs were not merely objects but participants in a quiet dialogue with those who watched. Civilian observers contributed stories imbued with poetry and curiosity. Fishermen on icy inlets noticed lights that hovered just above the water, pausing as if observing their activity, then drifting silently back into the darkness. Children spoke of sky dancers in hushed, reverent tones, their imaginations alight with arcs and loops traced against the backdrop of the northern lights. These accounts, when collated with military data, revealed remarkable patterns, coordinated swarms, deliberate poses, and subtle variations in color and brightness. Each encounter contributed to a growing mosaic of understanding, hinting at intelligence that operated both visibly and invisibly, simultaneously delicate and deliberate. Historical echoes resonated with these present-day sightings. The 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628, the Nimitz Tic Tac events, and the USS Omaha swarm offered points of reference, revealing consistency in behavior across decades. Analysts noted similarities in acceleration, formation, and responsiveness, suggesting that the orb's intelligence persisted over time, maintaining coherence and purpose even when separated by continents and years. Observers in Alaska felt connected to a continuum of encounters, understanding that each night of observation was part of a larger, unfolding narrative. Scientific investigation persisted with meticulous care. Data from thermal imaging, radar, and eyewitness accounts were cross-referenced and analyzed for patterns. Acceleration levels reached forces that would obliterate human-engineered craft, yet the orbs remained intact. Thermal readings defied conventional energy models, and electromagnetic interference disrupted instruments unpredictably. Theories emerged: gravity manipulation, localized spacetime distortion, or exotic energy harnessing, but none fully explained the observed behavior. Each anomaly served as a gentle reminder that the world holds layers of complexity and intelligence that defy immediate comprehension. Alaska's unique environment amplified these subtle effects. Snow-covered mountains reflected the orb's light in soft, fragmented patterns. Frozen rivers acted as mirrors, creating illusions of multiplicity and depth. Drifting clouds occasionally revealed, then concealed, clusters of objects. Observers learned to read these cues, adjusting their perception and attention to match the phenomenon's pace. Every micro-shift, every slight flicker, every reflected glimmer became significant, offering insight into a pattern of intelligence that was patient, deliberate, and unfathomably intricate. The orb's behavior suggested purpose. Solo orbs would explore cautiously, pausing to observe before advancing, while swarms displayed extraordinary coordination, splitting and merging seamlessly, as though moving according to rules invisible yet consistent. Observers began to perceive this as a form of communication, a silent exchange conducted through light, motion, and space. Each pause, loop, and subtle flicker carried potential meaning, inviting reflection rather than immediate explanation. Witnesses felt that understanding required patience, attention, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. The psychological impact on observers was profound. Hours spent inattentive watching cultivated heightened awareness, a sense of interconnectedness with the natural world, and a gentle humility in the face of intelligence far beyond human comprehension. The orb's deliberate movements taught patience, showing that observation itself could yield insight without requiring complete answers. Witnesses came to understand that some mysteries are meant to be experienced rather than solved, and that the act of paying attention is a form of participation in the intelligence unfolding above. Cultural responses blossomed in tandem with observation. Artists interpreted the orb's arcs and rotations in paint and music, translating motion into creative expression. Educators used encounters as opportunities to teach mindfulness, careful observation, and appreciation for subtlety in nature. Communities encouraged recording patterns, sharing observations, and fostering curiosity without fear. In Tese walls, the orbs became teachers, subtly guiding human attention and perception toward reflection, patience, and wonder. As the night deepened, the orchestration of movement grew more complex. Swarms traced intricate spirals over frozen lakes, hovered above ridges, and executed arcs with almost musical precision. Every flicker of light, every pause, every slight adjustment became meaningful in a narrative that only careful observation could reveal. The Arctic environment whined ice. Aurora interacted with the phenomena, amplifying the subtlety of perception and enriching the observer's experience. The orb's intelligence became evident not through display of power, but through patience, consistency, and silent communication. By the approach of dawn, the orbs began their retreat, slipping into currents unseen, leaving the observers with impressions rather than explanations. The night had imparted lessons in attention, subtlety, and quiet intelligence. Snow-laden ridges, frozen rivers, and icy forests seemed to hold a memory of the orb's passage, a faint shimmer that lingered in the morning light. Observers understood that the phenomena were not fleeting curiosities, but persistent presences, inviting continued reflection and careful study. The first light of morning bathed the Arctic landscape in delicate hues of pink, lavender, and pale gold. Mountains and rivers glimmered faintly, carrying echoes of the night's subtle choreography. Observers felt a quiet resonance within themselves, a sense of connection to intelligence beyond immediate understanding. It was an invitation to continue watching, learning, and appreciating the mysteries that lingered, not as threats or puzzles to be solved, but as presences to be acknowledged, reflected upon, and integrated into the ongoing experience of the world. And as the Arctic sun rose, the lingering presence of the orbs whispered of mysteries still unfolding, guiding the journey into understanding, yet unseen. Chapter 12. Reflections. In the Ice. The Arctic night had settled into its deepest tones, where shadows merged with the frozen expanse, and every breath of wind seemed laden with secrets. The sky stretched in a limitless dome, a soft gradient from midnight blue to the faintest violet along the horizon. Stars glimmered like distant lanterns, mirrored faintly on snow-laden plains and frozen rivers, creating the illusion of infinite depth. In this world, time slowed, every second drawn out and imbued with the potential for observation, reflection, and quiet revelation. It was here, in the stillness, that the orbs reappeared, emerging like whispers made visible, glinting faintly in the subtle luminescence of the aurora. Observers who had grown accustomed to these phenomena noted immediately how the metallic spheres moved differently tonight. Their pace was slower, more deliberate, as if considering the environment, weighing each motion with thoughtfulness. Solo orbs floated near ridges, hovering with imperceptible sway, while swarms traced arcs above lakes, their movement almost musical in rhythm. The orbs seemed aware of those who watched their gentle glimmer, drawing attention without demand, inviting contemplation rather than spectacle. Each reflection on ice, each interaction with the snowy landscape, deepened the sense of intimate intelligence at play. From military outposts to small Alaskan towns, the air was charged with subtle excitement and curiosity. Pilots recorded the familiar phenomena, accelerations beyond human capability, right-angle maneuvers without deceleration, seamless transitions from air to water. Instruments behaved unpredictably, radar signals faded, compasses wavered, but the orbs themselves remained unthreatening. Observers described a feeling of calm awareness, as though the objects were guides, teaching careful attention and patience rather than inspiring fear. A single orb hovered over a frozen inlet for several minutes, reflecting auroral light in patterns that seemed almost purposeful. A silent conversation between observer and phenomenon. Civilian encounters contributed rich layers to the narrative. Fishermen on ice-covered inlets saw amber and orange lights moving in precise patterns, pausing, hovering, and then gliding away. Children whispered to each other about sky dancers, their stories laced with awe and reverence. Artists and writers documented these impressions, capturing the subtleties of motion, light, and reflection in sketches, paintings, and music. Each account, while subjective, built a mosaic of understanding, revealing intelligence that was consistent across observers, geography, and time. The orb's patterns were increasingly recognizable. Solospheres seemed to explore cautiously, while swarms moved with a fluid cohesion that hinted at decision-making and responsiveness. Observers began to perceive subtle signals, pauses before changing direction, loops that repeated with slight variation, and flickers of light that seemed to punctuate the choreography. It was as though the orbs were offering lessons in perception and mindfulness, showing that understanding could emerge not from immediate answers but from patient, attentive observation. Scientific scrutiny remained careful and methodical. Every anomaly was logged and analyzed. Accelerations exceeding thousands of Gs without structural damage. Thermal readings defied known energy principles. Electromagnetic disruptions beyond conventional explanation. Researchers theorized on gravity manipulation, space-time distortion, and exotic propulsion. Yet each explanation felt incomplete. The orbs challenged human assumptions about physics, intelligence, and interaction, reminding observers that comprehension often required humility as much as curiosity. Alaska's geography added layers of sensory richness to the experience. Snow-capped peaks reflected soft light from the orbs, creating dynamic patterns of illumination. Frozen rivers acted as mirrors, doubling the apparent number of objects and adding depth to their choreography. Low clouds occasionally obscured 10 revealed clusters of orbs, producing moments of quiet surprise and awe. Observers learned to read these subtleties, noticing shifts in speed, position, and reflection as clues to the larger intelligence at play. The historical context resonated with each encounter. Past sightings, such as the 1986 Japan Airlines Flight 1628, the Nimitz Tick, and the USS Omaha Swarm, offered patterns and benchmarks for understanding. Analysts noted consistent acceleration profiles, formation structures, and transmedium capabilities, suggesting that the phenomena had maintained coherence across decades and continents. The intelligence behind the orbs appeared deliberate, patient, and guided by principles beyond immediate human understanding, creating continuity in the human experience of the unknown. Psychologically, observers experienced transformation. Hours of attentive watching fostered heightened awareness, mindfulness, and an acute sense of interconnection with both the natural and the unknown. The orb's deliberate motions encouraged introspection. How could one perceive without rushing to conclusions? What could be learned from silence, observation, and patience? Witnesses realized that understanding the phenomena required more than technical analysis. It demanded reflection, openness, and an appreciation for subtle intelligence, expressed through motion and light. Cultural response flourished in tandem. Artists translated the orb's patterns into visual art, music, and literature, exploring the interplay of light, motion, and reflection. Educators used the phenomena to teach attentive observation, patience, and curiosity. Communities shared sightings, recordings, and personal reflections, fostering a culture of mindful engagement with the natural world. The orbs, once enigmatic visitors, had become subtle instructors, guiding humans to appreciate observation, reflection, and the slow unfolding of knowledge. As the night deepened, the orb's choreography became increasingly sophisticated. Swarms traced spirals above frozen lakes, solospheres hovered over ridges, and reflections on snow and ice created an intricate interplay of light and shadow. Every micro-movement, pause, and flicker carried meaning, a silent narrative accessible only to those willing to observe attentively. The Arctic environment acted as a collaborator, enhancing the phenomenon's elegance and amplifying the lessons in perception, patience, and understanding. By dawn, the orbs retreated, slipping into unseen currents, leaving behind impressions rather than explanations. The landscape seemed to hold a memory of their passage. Snow shimmering faintly, frozen rivers reflecting residual light, and mountains bathed in the gentle glow of morning. Observers carried with them not fear, but insight or quiet, profound awareness of intelligence beyond immediate comprehension. The encounter reinforced that some truths emerge slowly, through patient observation, reflection, and reverence for the unknown. The first light of day revealed the frozen Arctic in delicate shades of pink, lavender, and gold. Snow-covered peaks and mirrored rivers seemed alive with subtle brilliance, holding echoes of the night's silent choreography. Observers felt a lingering resonance, a connection to an intelligence that revealed itself not through force, but through grace and deliberate presence. It was a reminder that mysteries, while not always solvable, could guide thought, perception, and understanding in ways far more profound than mere explanation. As morning light filled the Arctic sky, the orb's gentle teachings lingered, hinting at revelations yet to unfold in the quiet spaces of the world. Chapter 13. The Last Whisper. For the Arctic night was a delicate hush, draping itself across mountains, frozen rivers, and forests with an almost sacred patience. Shadows softened as the last traces of twilight melted into a profound, dark blue that seemed to stretch endlessly, creating a canvas both intimate and infinite. In this silence, every sound, the whisper of wind over snow, the faint creak of ice, the distant cry of a lone bird, was amplified, resonating with the weight of time and the subtle presence of the unseen. It was the perfect stage for the final movements of the orbs, those enigmatic visitors that had danced across the skies for decades, drawing attention, curiosity, and reflection. The first glimmers appeared far on the horizon, soft pinpricks of metallic light weaving through the clouds, like threads of a tapestry. Observers immediately recognized the signature of the spheres. Subtle rotations, glinting surfaces that reflected the faint aurora above, and motion that was at once purposeful and graceful. Unlike the hurried flights of human-engineered aircraft, the orbs moved as if in meditation, each shift in direction and speed deliberate, measured, and infused with intention. Their presence carried a quiet reassurance, a sense that despite their mystery, they were participants in a gentle dialogue rather than agents of disturbance. From military radar stations to isolated civilian cabins, eyes turned skyward. Pilots documented the familiar anomalies, accelerations that defied conventional physics, perfect right-angle turns without loss of stability, and the transmedium transitions that left no trace of disturbance. Instruments faltered. Inexplicably, radars flickered. Altimeters wavered. But the orbs remained unharmed, untouched by the limitations that constrained human technology. Observers described a profound sensation of alignment, as if the night, the land, and the celestial intelligence of the orbs were entwined in a subtle harmony, a rhythm that could only be appreciated through careful attention and reflection. The orbs did not move randomly. Solospheres explored the landscape meticulously, pausing above ridges, frozen rivers, and snow-covered valleys, their glinting surfaces reflecting every nuance of the environment. Swarms orchestrated complex patterns, arcs, spirals, and slow, deliberate dances across the sky that seemed almost musical in their execution. Observers began to notice recurring motifs, pauses that punctuated movement, loops that repeated with slight variation, and bursts of faint light that seemed to mark intentional points of focus. It was a language without words, a story written in motion and light, accessible only to those willing to watch patiently, deeply, and without expectation. Civilian accounts added vivid texture to the experience. Fishermen in remote coves described amber lights hovering above the ice, sometimes mirroring their own boats in subtle reflection. Children whispered stories of sky dancers in hushed tones, their imaginations blending seamlessly with observation. Artists and writers documented every subtle detail, curves of light, flickers of reflection, delicate pauses in motion, translating them into works that sought to capture the silent poetry of the encounter. These stories, when woven together, revealed a tapestry of intelligence, consistency, and purpose that transcended individual perception. Historical echoes resonated as well. The Japan Airlines Flight 1628 encounter, the Nimitz Tic Tac events, the USS Omaha swarm, and countless civilian reports offered a continuum of observation, suggesting that the orb's intelligence had persisted across decades and continents. Analysts noted similarities in behavior: extreme accelerations, coordinated swarming, right-angle maneuvers, and the uncanny ability to traverse air and water seamlessly. Alaska had become a focal point, a stage where the continuity of these phenomena was visible, their presence both mysterious and reassuring, challenging human understanding while inviting reflection. Scientific inquiry approached with both rigor and humility. Thermal imaging, radar logs, and witness accounts were meticulously analyzed. Accelerations exceeding thousands of Gs occurred without damage. Electromagnetic interference disrupted instruments unpredictably, and energy emissions defied known models. Theorists proposed gravity manipulation, localized space-time distortion, or exotic propulsion mechanisms, but none could fully explain the observed behaviors. Each anomaly reinforced a profound truth. Some mysteries exist not to be solved immediately, but to expand perception, patience, and awareness. Alaska's environment added layers of subtlety and beauty. Snow-covered mountains reflected the orb's light. Frozen rivers created illusions of depth and multiplicity, and drifting clouds obscured and revealed them in a gentle rhythm. Observers learned to read these cues, discerning patterns in pauses, accelerations, and reflections. Every micro-movement, every flicker of light, every slight alteration in trajectory became a message, a whisper from a presence that operated with patience, precision, and perhaps understanding beyond human comprehension. The psychological effect on witnesses was profound. Hours of careful observation fostered heightened perception, mindfulness, and an acute sense of connection with both the natural world and the unseen intelligence above. Observers felt a quiet humility, an understanding that some truths could only be approached through attention, reflection, and the gentle surrender of expectation. The orb's deliberate movements taught patience and respect, reminding humans that comprehension often arises from immersion rather than force, from observation rather than assumption. Cultural interpretations flourished in parallel. Artists captured the orb's patterns in visual media, translating arcs of light into paintings, music, and poetry. Educators used these encounters to teach observation, patience, and appreciation for subtlety. Communities shared recordings, narratives, and reflections, fostering curiosity and attentive engagement with the environment. The orbs became teachers, their silent choreography imparting lessons in presence, observation, and reverence for the mysteries that exist just beyond immediate understanding. As the night deepened, the orb's choreography grew ever more intricate. Solar spheres explored the ridges with careful deliberation. Swarms traced arcs and spirals over frozen lakes, their reflections multiplying in a delicate interplay of light and shadow. Every movement seemed considered, every pause intentional, every flicker of light meaningful. The Arctic itself, wind, ice, aurora interacted with the phenomena, enhancing perception and imbuing observers with a sense of participation in the unfolding intelligence. Hours passed in this quiet communion until the orbs began to retreat. Their movements slowed, softened, and eventually disappeared into unseen currents, leaving traces only in the memory of observers and in subtle changes in the environment. A faint shimmer across it, an echo in the stillness of ice, and the lingering resonance of intelligence felt rather than explained. Witnesses understood that these encounters were not fleeting curiosities, but enduring presences, guiding reflection, attention, and wonder. As the first light of dawn brushed the horizon, painting the sky in pale golds, soft pinks, and lavender hues, the Arctic seemed to exhale. Snow-dusted peaks shimmered faintly, frozen rivers mirrored the gentle glow, and the air carried a quiet resonance of the night's movements. Observers felt a lasting connection to something beyond immediate comprehension, an intelligence that had revealed itself through presence, grace, and deliberate action, rather than spectacle or force. It was a quiet, patient invitation to continue watching, learning, and reflecting. The orbs had departed, but their lessons endured. Patience, attentiveness, humility, and wonder. Their silent movements across the frozen expanse reminded humans that understanding is often slow, subtle, and layered, that some truths are revealed only to those who can truly see, and that the unknown is not something to fear, but to respect, observe, and contemplate. The Arctic landscape, bathed in the gentle light of dawn, seemed to hold a memory of the orb's passage here. Soft glimmer in snow, a mirrored reflection in ice, a quiet hum in the stillness. Observers carried with them the enduring presence of the phenomena, a gentle awareness that some mysteries are as profound as they are invisible, as patient as they are eternal. In this way, The final night of observation became a beginning, a reminder that the world holds wonders, waiting for those who watch carefully, patiently, and with open hearts. And as the Arctic sun rose fully, the orb's final whisper faded into the horizon, leaving behind a quiet invitation to wonder, to reflect, and to continue seeking. The Arctic landscape lay quiet beneath the rising sun, each ridge and frozen river bathed in soft, golden light. The orbs had vanished into unseen currents, leaving no trace but the subtle shimmer lingering on snow and ice, a delicate memory of their passage. And yet, those who had watched the pilots, the civilians, the distant observers felt their presence still. It was a present not of threat, nor a spectacle, but of gentle guidance, a quiet intelligence that whispered of patience, wonder, and the mysteries that stretch beyond human understanding. The lessons of the night unfolded slowly in each heart. Patience, first and foremost, as they realized that some truths are not given all at once, but revealed in fragments, in patterns, in quiet observation. Attention to detail became a form of reverence, where the arc of a light, the reflection on ice, or the subtle flicker of movement spoke volumes without words. Curiosity transformed into something more deliberate, less urgent or careful, deliberate willingness to observe, to reflect, and to question. Not for answers alone, but for the richness of the journey itself. Communities spoke softly of what they had witnessed. Children recounted the sky dancers with wonder that went beyond mere imagination, their voices carrying awe that was honest and unforced. Artists captured fleeting motions in paint, in song, in written words, seeking to honor the subtle elegance of intelligence at work. Teachers and storytellers wove these observations into lessons, reminding listeners that some mysteries are more profound when they unfold slowly, when they invite thought, and when they are felt rather than solved. Even in the absence of the orbs, the night's intelligence lingered. Radar, data, videos, and written accounts provided clues. But more enduring was the feeling, the sense of connection between human perception and something vast, deliberate, and beyond immediate comprehension. It was a hum beneath the snow, a rhythm in the wind, a shimmer in the frozen rivers. Observers understood that some presences cannot be fully grasped, only acknowledged, and only allowed to inspire wonder. The Arctic, with its harsh beauty and infinite horizons, became a classroom of subtlety. Every snow-covered ridge, every frozen lake, every flicker of northern lights held the potential for reflection. Those who had witnessed the orbs carried with them a heightened awareness, a deepened patience, and a quiet humility. In the repetition of motion and reflection, they discovered the gentle cadence of intelligence that moves not to dominate but to teach, not to frighten but to reveal that observation itself is a form of communion. And so, the story comes to a gentle close, not with final answers, but with an enduring invitation. The unknown persists, patiently awaiting those willing to look, to listen, and to feel. The Arctic skies, the distant echoes of aurora, and the memory of the orbs remind us that the world is layered, rich with intelligence, and full of mysteries that call for curiosity and respect. Every quiet moment under the vast sky, every reflective pause by frozen rivers, becomes an opportunity to connect to see beyond the obvious, to wonder without fear, and to embrace the gentle cadence of the unseen. As the sun climbs higher, melting the shadows of night, the memory of the orbs remains, a subtle echo in the mind and heart. They are reminders that the universe holds more than we can measure, more than we can control, and more than we can yet explain. But in the patient act of watching, of reflecting, and of opening oneself to subtle intelligence, we find a kind of knowledge deeper than answers. The knowledge that we are part of a vast, unfolding story, one in which observation, wonder, and quiet attentiveness are the truest forms of understanding. The orbs may be gone, but their lesson endures. That mystery is not something to fear, but something to honor. That intelligence need not shout to be heard, and that the simplest act of pausing, of watching, and of reflecting can reveal the most profound truths. And in this, the story whispers to us all: remain curious, remain patient, and let the unseen guide you gently, one quiet moment at a time.